I thought, based on the nucleotide or sort of nucleotide analog work that Ardon and Rangana sort of introduced, I did some map comparisons to see if that could be useful at all. So I thought if there's time, I'd put it up for some discussion.
Well, probably there's no time like the present. We were going to begin with any exciting results, news, or updates, right?
I don't have that exciting, yeah.
Or did Elena want to do some one-pager presentation first?
Especially when somebody has sent one page just literally 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Without any exaggerations.
Yes.
Okay.
Didn't Peter say no time like the present?
Okay, let's go then. So, yeah, I was just making sure I was up to date with other things I'm supposed to be doing. All right, let me go. Let me see if I can. Yeah, okay. Since we are doing, yeah, we get to get some feedback on this. So what I want to do with this guy is, am I allowed to share the screen? If I look at this screen, I can see what you can see as well.
I think, did you find it? It's at the very bottom green button.
Then I'm going to select the screen to share. Okay, I'm just selecting a certain screen.
You can share all and then just say.
I'm on Ubuntu. Okay.
Okay.
What we've got here is I'm looking at the density of Remesvir. Is that how we pronounce it? Overlaid with the Remesvir map. That all looks good, and as people pointed out, you know, the nucleotides there really strongly, but the connection through the sort of ribose is weaker. There's another density then at this lower level that appears here off this phosphate. I don't know if anybody's seen that and commented, what could that be? Is that what Ardon was thinking could be an alternative nucleotide position?
I would be very careful because maybe over sharpened and you are seeing tails of density because of
okay. Yeah, this is the maps as in the EMDB. I haven't done any sharpening. But then I also wanted to, I overlaid, I did some interesting fun things. I overlaid and aligned the non-nucleotide map, and I got some pictures. My computer's a bit slow. We'll come back to that. So basically, if I do difference maps on aligned maps of the sort of this two maps from this group, the RNA map versus the non-RNA map, you see a really nice density for the RNA and the phosphates, as little blobs. So it's like, and I aligned those independently of the models. So it's really nice, maybe independent, potentially, you know, another way to sort of validate the maps. But then I also aligned this other map from another group, which was the same complex, but actually a bigger complex, but without any nucleic acid. So this map is 110007. I don't know if any of you know it. And it has the nucleic acid, but not the sort of drug in it. And it also at a low density shows up something quite, you know, at a density comparable to our Remesvir map, some density at the same nucleotide position. I know
I
that
wouldn't call it comparable. There's a high density on the base, but that's not enough.
okay. So this is the maybe I mean it could be weak again. I haven't done any sharpening or sort of balancing of B factors, but look, there's density on the bases, and then at a weaker density, okay, there's something appearing, at nucleotides. So I don't know whether that's something to look at. And again, perhaps do this more carefully with balancing the sort of the temperature factor in all the maps.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I suppose what is good is that in this map where there isn't supposed to be a drug, there isn't any density for the drug mainly, except you're going to really low, or even if you go to really low thresholds. But there's something pops up with the nucleotide which maybe should be investigated. But if we look at the map which has a drug in it, that clearly gets something at the nucleotide quite strongly, but it is weaker, as people pointed out. I didn't do any sharpening or blurring. And then the other thing, so I did map analyses for these two by the tools that just using Chimera, and you can see that one has the RNA and one doesn't. When I tried to line the other map I was investigating, I couldn't because there was too much difference in between the maps. One has a lot of extra density on it. So I did align it based on the models. And the other thing I can point out is that for these structures, when I did alignments based on maps or alignments based on models, I get very similar results. But that, again, we could think of that as a validation method, because if it doesn't, then there's potentially an issue. Or alternatively, if they aren't models, then we can still do very useful alignments and comparisons and difference maps based just on map alignment and differences. So I'm just trying to think of a way to make doing these alignments easier, having a more interactive tool where you can sort of circle, the part of the structure that you think should be aligned, and having it do that really quickly. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say is, and I'd also like to find a picture of my, where I did I did a subtraction, did this difference map, which looked quite nice. This computer's been quite slow now. So, anybody else got anything else to say? They can.
So how are you scaling these two maps together?
Okay, I haven't done any particular scaling. So it's all at face value. So as I said, B factors could be balanced. I was thinking the next step I would do is I'd run this sort of log scale of both against the given models, and then do.
My question is, do you mean scaling in sense of the pixel size, or do you mean scaling in sense of the ranges of densities?
My question was about ranges of density, but indeed, I guess so. One has to worry about both issues. That's certainly true. But I meant the density scaling.
Yeah, I agree with Peter. I would say at the present moment we suggest that as soon the PDB files are more or less standard procedure, and we know the scale on the PDB files, that it's much easier to adjust the scale in sense of the pixel size, but in sense of the densities, I'm not aware if Chimera is able to do such scaling.
No.
Agnel's difference map can do the scaling on the amplitude.
That's exactly how you will calculate the differences of maps. That's what a while ago, and one of our previous meetings, I was saying that if the original images were differently normalized, and you have quite a lot, for example, some certain slightly positive. Some just want to the average density should be equal to 0, and it depends on the how far images went from the focus, balance of the low frequencies, high frequencies. It's quite a lot of troubles. That's exactly this issue related to the scaling of density is extremely important.
Agnel, you want to explain? Maybe?
Yeah, Chimera doesn't scale the map, so it's just absolute difference. And the difference map that I implemented in CCPM, it has both global and local scaling. So the local scaling follows the log scale procedure, doing the scaling in Windows. But yeah, you can do local scaling with the difference map.
Yeah.
Mm.
Let us, did you get the difference map?
Yes, I'm just trying to find how to share that now. Changing my sharing screen. But I'm running on my other machine, I'm running Zoom under Ubuntu, and it's behaves a little differently.
Yeah. Since so many people are working on difference maps within this
Actually,
group.
not so much, not so many.
Oh, really?
So great, that's
If
right.
it-
That scaling, yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I thought.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back. I disappeared for a moment.
Okay.
Carry on.
Right.
So if I'm
Control sharing, there we go.
Yeah, please continue. Yep.
So I'm just trying to work out how to change my window.
Might be, shall we go to the my part until Alan does calculations? When it will be ready, he will tell us.
Okay.
If anybody else has exciting results.
if I may, I did a very similar analysis as Alan presented. So where I take into account the scaling, not the density scaling, only the pixel sizes and resampling in the same grid. So exactly, let's say same analysis. How do I share my screen? Okay, give me one
Green button in the middle
Yeah.
of your screen at the very bottom.
Yes. Okay.
So I just put my difference map up.
Oh,
I'll do that. They see the yellow bits
Yeah.
are the difference maps. So you can see they really sit nicely, strongly bold, on the phosphates, and the bases are really strong. And that's with scaling the two maps from the same group. So those maps would have been
Can
well.
you play a bit with the threshold for the differences?
I can't do that.
We will switch off the atomic model.
Yeah, I can do that later for you because this is just a screen grab. I'll bring this up while somebody else does something, and then I could come back to you.
Okay, thanks.
So just before you all present other results, I just want to say that if you're interested, so we now have 3 RNA polymerase structures with the RNA, and 2 of them have got remdesivir in it.
Okay.
I have a small presentation which just gives an overview of these structures. If you want it, I can present it, but otherwise we can skip it.
Well, I'd be
Yes,
interested.
please, Ardan,
that.
maybe you present it so that gives a good introduction to this.
Is that
Okay, is that okay with you, Rangana? Or?
Yep.
yeah, that's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
And only one question. Do you have a half maps also?
So I think Rangana asked me this. We don't have the half maps of the one that was in question, the one that he was looking at. So let me just share my screen then.
I think out of all of the maps, at least the ones that I have seen, there are only about 4 or 5 with half maps. And in some sense, that's kind of the biggest problem.
Yeah, that should be made a compulsory problem.
So I think if anyone here wants to sort of write to these authors and suggest, I mean, just, you know, gentle pressure on them to send the half maps or encourage them to deposit their raw data to Empire and so on, that's really would be helpful as well. Okay, so I just have this slide here just to get things going. So I mean, the RNA polymerase, so in this case, we have an RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. So it's using, I mean, if you got the mRNA as template, you're getting the cRNA and vice versa. And I think although this seems very trivial, it's important to keep in mind because when they create these sort of duplex template primers to create their structures, what they actually mix and what they actually get does not necessarily have to be the same. So I think it's important that even at that stage, one has to be a little bit aware of, you know, that you need to be sure that what you're actually mixing in as your RNA is actually what you're seeing. And I'll show you one example of where this is an issue. Another thing to keep in mind is that, so in terms of size, is about 120 angstroms large. From what I've read, these RNA-dependent RNA polymerases for viruses are very fast. So they're processing something like 100 bases per second, which would mean about 340 angstroms per second. So that's about 3 times, if you think of an escalator, it's kicking out about 3 times as many people as the length of the escalator per second, and it's much faster than, for example, a ribosome, which is doing 100 amino acids per minute or something like that. So from my perspective, I wouldn't be surprised if sort of there is a certain amount of fuzziness in the placement of the RNA because it's you know, we have something which has to move quite quickly. You don't have very strong bonding. So if the resolution of the RNA was lower than the rest, I wouldn't be surprised. And I wouldn't be surprised if you have to use sort of special focus classification methods and so on to get really a more close
Do they
picture.
not chemically arrest the RNA polymerase always at the same point?
Well, I think they essentially do this by not mixing in sort of the nucleotide triphosphate, right? So there's no, it should not be active, but you can, you know, what exactly is it that is keeping it in one place? So I wouldn't be surprised that at thermal equilibrium, things don't necessarily sit exactly as a structural biologist would like it to sit, completely fixed.
I mean, I feel like that statement probably, well, anyway, never mind.
Right?
Don't worry.
So I didn't get what you said.
It's fine, don't worry.
Okay, so this consists of 3 proteins, NSP12, NSP8, and NSP7. The NSP8 is thought to also be a primase, so it's capable of making oligonucleotides. It has a dual function. In terms of the way that this looks, so they often describe it as, you know, look at your right hand when your palm is facing your face, and you have, can you see my pointer?
Yeah.
I'll just change the pointer to a laser pointer. So you have a thumb, you have your fingers, and sort of between your thumb and fingers, you have the active site. And if you turn your palm sort of anti-clockwise, you can see that this is now seen from the side. So you have the duplex sticking out in this direction. So remdesivir is a ATP analog which gets incorporated into the product RNA and stalls polymerization. So I have a picture of the remdesivir on the right-hand side here. One thing to note is that it does not stall polymerization immediately. At least that's based on the biochemistry experiments which have been done. What they have noticed is it does not block, it does not sit in the catalytic site. It gets incorporated maybe 2 or 3 places before it actually stops polymerization. It also, in terms of how, distinguishing features. So one of the distinguishing features it has is this, if you look at here, it has this carbon nitrogen triple bond, and this is something which is distinguishes it from the adenosine. And it's thought that this is also important in the sense that it causes geometric distortion, and that's what sort of causes the stalling of the polymerization. So in terms of structures, so some of these structures were already present the last time we had the meeting, but now we have all the papers out as well. So one is Hillen et al., which is a Nature paper, which is the Kramer lab. The other one is from Yin et al. This was in Science, and then you got Wang et al., which is in Cell. So in terms of main components, the Hillen et al. Is of the RNA polymerase with RNA. The Yin et al. Is with RNA plus remdesivir, and the Wang et al. Is RNA plus remdesivir as well. Expression system, so this one they used for NSP12 insect cells, E. coli for 7 and 8. This one has insect cells for NSP12 and E. coli for 7 and 8. And they say the reason why they did this was because when they tried to express 7 and 8 in insect cells, they have a very low efficiency, so they had to do it this way. And Wang et al. Is everything in E. coli. So if you look at the RNA template and product used, primer used for the Hillen et al., it's quite interesting because they did mix a certain template and a certain primer, but what they got was quite unexpected. So what they actually get in the RNA polymerase is not what they expected. Instead, what they get is simply the template. So what they didn't realize when they did this was that template was a palindrome. So it sort of self-annealed in 4 copies. And what they see is the self-annealed 4 copies of the template. So it's not a template primer self-annealing. In the Yin et al., so I have a little bit of a question here because, sorry. So in the Yin et al., so they describe one sequence in the supplementary methods, and then they, in terms of the structural analysis, they've used sequences which are almost the same, but which are kind of different in a couple of bases. And I don't exactly understand. So there are some differences here which I don't completely understand. And then finally, the Wang, I haven't gone through that in detail. In terms of image processing, so the Hillen et al., they used about 172,000 particles from initially 1.3 million picked. They state that they use at least partially a PDB model as a reference, and they have multiple rounds of classification and sorting, CryoSpark and Reliant 3, 2.9 angstroms resolution. The Yin et al., 130,000 particles from 2.4 million particles picked. But in this case, they don't discuss any reference. So they say that they've done it's completely reference-free in CryoSpark, coming to 2.5 angstroms resolution. The Wang et al., I've not gone through completely because there are multiple states and so on here. But again, CryoSpark and Reliant, approximately same numbers of particles, hundreds of thousands from starting millions.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
So in terms of results, if you look at so the RNA visible, so I think one of the surprising things in the Hillen paper was that what they see is this palindromic sequence. But what is quite nice is they actually see 2 turns of the duplex. So they see a substantial amount of RNA. And there should be 18 bases. I think they're missing only 4 of them. In the Yin et al. Paper, there's only 1 turn of the duplex. And there's quite a lot of missing. So what I'm showing here in the red is what they see, and the rest is missing. So they're only seeing 14 of 30 bases of template and 11 bases of the primer out of 20. The Wang et al. I've not looked in detail. When it comes to remdesivir, so Hillen paper should not have, does not have any remdesivir. In the Yin et al. Paper, it's visible in the catalytic site, which is, which should not really be the, from the biochemistry, if it's getting incorporated, it should be incorporated. It can probably be incorporated at several positions down. And given the fact that you just have, you have a string of uracils here, so it should continue and it should get incorporated, but it's seen in the catalytic side. Wang et al., I think, has done a lot more. So I'm still in the process of looking through this, but I think what they see is different from the Yin et al., because I think they see it being incorporated one in, so it's seen in the -1 side. Another important thing is that if you look at structural features, so the Hillen paper sees both of the NSP8s, and the NSP8s sort of form a clamp for the long RNA duplex. The Yin et al. Is a little bit of outlier because it only sees 1 NSP8. And I think, as far as I remember, it does not see any interaction between the NSP8 and the RNA. The Wang et al. Again sees both of the NSP8s, but I think in addition to seeing the NSP8s, it also sees quite an important sort of conformational change in the NSP8. So in some ways, the Yin et al. Paper has, there are lots of observations here which are kind of outliers from the other 2 papers, but also outliers from some of the biochemistry. These are just a couple of things which I, going through. So the Hillen et al. Paper, this again, which is what Alan was showing, looks like the density is quite well defined from what I could see. One thing which I saw, if I change the contour level, the connectivity of here is quite good as you change the density, but you have these gaps between the bases which are seen quite clearly. If you go to, so if you look at it sort of from the top, on the other hand, you see that, so these gaps are usually, the gaps between the bases is more clear than sort of, you have a more connected density between the bases in a stack sometimes. So these are just small things which I could see. Just like Alan was saying, that if you look at the catalytic site, you do have this small density. It's not connected, but you do have a density there where there shouldn't be any density. In the Yin et al. Paper, one thing which I found was the density was often a lot more fragmented between sort of the base, the sugar, and the phosphate. But on the other hand, the density between the bases here was quite, there was some density. So I don't know if this is I think what Rangana was showing, that it might be a filtering type of thing. This is
the distance between the bases the same in both cases?
So to be honest, I haven't actually measured them. I didn't look at that might be good just to verify as well. And but another thing is that when you look at it from the top, you can see that the bases here, I mean, the density sort of merges between them, but you have quite big gaps between the density here. So I don't know if this is significant. It was just something that I could see when I looked at these.
Question is, Ardan, if you had the chance to check, does this some kind of clear splitting and links between the some kind of nucleotides in other cases, does it directionally dependent?
Well, it would seem in this case, I mean, it's directionally in the sense, or you mean that,
is it the same direction, like, for example, on the next slide, when you have the link between the nucleotides? It's a difficult question. I know might be you didn't pay attention to that, but that's exactly, for example, when we can looked at the presentation previously given, I do believe by Rangana, then I got some kind of, we have very often problems. That's why, for example, it would be essential in general globally to deposit distribution of angles of the data which have been used, because here it's a local resolution, might be here significantly better. But in other cases, the local resolution might be still okay, but it will be wrong.
okay.
If we have half data, we can calculate that.
Half data do not help that.
Half data gives a local correlation, but
It still does not help when the distribution of angles is wrong. No, it's not wrong. It's just happening. The question what we, that I'm going to discuss to raise this issue during my small presentation.
If you have half
it's
data,
really open question.
If you have half data and you calculate correlation free space, position dependent, then you get that information also.
Okay, sorry for the interruption.
Okay, so I'll just, so this was the catalytic site. So you see the remdesivir, I mean, here you see the blob, which corresponds to the base. If you're at a high contour level, and if you go down in contour level, you see better definition. I think this was the...
What is the resolution here?
You mean of the...
My understanding it was 2.7. Ah, okay, sorry. Yeah.
That's 2.5, 2.9.
So I remember when I blurred this map by 30, so most of this questionable density is gone. Probably it's an artifact of over-sharpening.
And just noise amplification.
And I think, yeah, so in terms of distinguishing remdesivir from ATP, so that's basically, this thing is kind of important. So this is the one which I couldn't find to start with, but Rangana, you pointed this out. So you have this, the nitrile group, and this disconnected density is sort of shows that this thing exists, but it is, even at this low contour level, it was disconnected. But I think, Rangana, you did some filtering, and when it seems much better defined in your thing.
Again, half maps becomes important.
Yeah. Okay, so this was just, I just wanted to point out that there are 3 structures which might be good to look at together. And I think, Alan, you looked at 2 of them together. It might be good also to see the 3rd paper as well.
What's the PDB of your Wang et al. Paper?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Can I make one suggestion? Yes. Should we make as soon as some maps come, yes, and we send automatically from this group of people an email to them that we need a half data, so that we don't get we don't write again and again same thing. From this group that we need half data and the confidential is blah 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 and so on. But if the data are in the PDB, then no confidentiality. Because it seems that in most of the cases we don't have half data. That's not.
We can have half maps, but somehow it's a really tricky issue. I'm not sure that you will reveal that it exists or not exist out of the half maps. We have quite a lot serious problem which we need to discuss. I'm not saying that I'm denying that you should not have half maps. It's extremely useful issue, but nonetheless there are quite a lot issues which we need to discuss together.
Yes, but just sending an automatic email that we need half maps, that would be good. I would be for it.
Did you want to expand on your point for the moment, Elena, specifically?
Specifically because typically the overall map and half maps, when you're doing something like high frequencies and fine details, very often blurred, and you have the resolution map is goes. What we are discussing right now, we are talking of the, if I will correctly, Ardan will correct me, that the size of the, how to say, grid in this for the mesh is about 1 angstrom, is it?
I think so, yeah.
Yes. Then we are talking of the some kind of maxima, which are, for example, 2 angstrom, 1 angstrom, etc. Those blobs. And we are not sure are they real or not. It's related very much to the occupancy. It's very much related to stability, and if you like, temperature factor, and it's really very much severed by over-sharpening. The map is definitely over-sharpened. But if we have uneven distribution of angles, which come naturally from the images, because particles, they have possibly very often preference and orientation in water, then comparison between two halves does not reveal any issues related exclusively to the not complete, not even distribution of angles in the Euler sphere. It means that if you have some kind of distortions and elongation, what I suggested in this, why in some certain cases, for example, nucleotides are very well resolved, and in other cases they are not, they are linked between each other. That's my impression, that it's depending on the distribution of angles in the Euler sphere. And if you take half maps, even by random, it's still, each of them, they will have a angular preferences in distribution of angles. And therefore, in this direction, correlation will be quite good, but in perpendicular, it will fall down. But that's exactly, local resolution will not provide you any additional information, because it's still, both maps are suffering from the same problem.
Yeah, so you want some sort of flag of anisotropic resolution due to sampling?
No, I have some other ideas.
I mean, that would be a good step 0.
I have certain ideas which I'm quite happy to discuss with everybody slightly later, because we are right now running in the general ideas, but majority, the problem is this majority of people who are doing high resolution maps, they do that using press the button. They never even looking. And in this level, Reline and CRISPR, they do provide distribution angles, but people do not think what they're looking at. They do not understand what's going on. They do not understand it was a problem. And it was not only once one map when we're suffering from these troubles. Since it has been shown in other previous presentations that sometimes suddenly the fit pretends that we have beta layers, but at the resolution 3 angstrom, we're supposed to see beta strands, but we don't see, and suddenly it goes just perpendicular to the lines in the map. It means we have problems with the orientation, the distribution of angles, and people, they do not realize the problem. And unfortunately, the general, neither Fourier shell correlation, neither local resolution, they do not indicate that it's a problem of the unlucky, unhappy distribution of angles. I'm not going to blame the people, because sometimes they do not understand how it comes out. It has been discussed in several papers. I can list that. For example, it was The first guy who was talking of that, do you like or not, it was Marine Van Hill, then it was Chris Rousseau, then it was Dmitry Lunkis. They were talking of that, and they're talking, that's the fact. But nobody, in general, only in a magic a while ago, it was somehow mentioned that how the problem can be rectified. It's later came theoretical approach, but never was realized, like a point spread function of the entire distribution of angles, that we have to do some kind of deconvolution. It's never has been done. People were thinking of that, and sorry, I'm right now, we are trying to do that. So far, we were moving slightly in a different direction, but okay, possibly Alan can do that. It's really not a difficult issue.
Yeah. What do you think about the program to do 3D Fourier shell correlations?
What do you mean 3D Fourier shell?
Dmitry Lunkis, he does a sort of a Fourier shell correlation that's anisotropic. It's different in different directions.
Yeah, it sometimes happens, but it depends if it's absolutely lousy in a certain direction. If you have just one direction, then it's really absolutely obvious. But if you have some kind of not quite severe preference in the orientation, for example, if you just have only end views, it's one story. But if you have side views, it's another story. How to deal with that?
Yeah, but there's a plot that can show you that in a diagram. Alternative, obviously, you look at the angle distribution.
Okay, you have this plot, but the problem is how you are going to blame and how you can rectify the problem.
Well, first you've got to identify it. So maybe the plot should be up there with validation.
This issue in general, that's what in the future we have to discuss. It's an important issue. Majority of people, honestly, they do not understand what is behind of the problem existing in electron microscopy. Should I go to my presentation?
Yeah.
Should I stop sharing?
No,
how many do you have left?
Yeah, Eleanor, probably you should do your part of the agenda would be good.
All right, okay. Just let me find my file. I don't have any presentation.
Hold on, in the meanwhile, your file was at 7C2K. Is that the new structure? Wang et al.
I'll probably have to look at the. I think I put them in the Word document that I sent Elena, and I think you would have been CC'd because there was a table in that, and I think I have all the structures in that table.
Okay.
I just sort of had a thought. You were wondering whether this drug is actually there or not. Has anyone actually looked to see if the conformation makes sense of the drug?
Okay. Can you see my presentation? This one, only one slide. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. Since I've got some kind of one-page reports only absolutely last days, and keep in mind that I was busy with something else, I was not able to get some kind of global assessment, and I didn't arrange any presentation. But in sense of that, what we have done, since we were discussing, like was nicely given by Jane, what do we think of the meeting? I just copied and pasted some sentences which apparently were given by Jane, that we find this meeting useful, and especially I find that in general, and possibly I don't know what we want to do further, but I think it's extremely fruitful when we have different point of view and what we can to do that. In general, we have realized new and a new version of the problem in which we have somehow to vocalize, identify, and to some extent we need to think what would be the best way to deal with it. It doesn't mean that we can deal it right now, but that's exactly, I do believe that it would be helpful for the future proposal to identify and to distinguish what was done before, what we are, how to say, running, and what we have realized now, and how it can go to our new future grant proposal. That is extremely important to separate these steps. And on this level, majority from my point of view, previous hours sessions in general, it turns out that half of our group mostly related to the assessment of the atomic models, understanding what's going on, and half of our group is more close to EM data. And so far, everybody was absolutely obsessed with getting the high resolution, 2 angstrom. And do you know, I hope everybody from you have heard about the 3 papers at nearly, really at atomic resolution, it was yours. It was Holger Stark, and eventually it was by Sriram Subramanian, lovely beta galactic gather, when they have got very high resolution and were able to see quite a lot of details and structures. So the race for the high resolution, it's continuous and it will go. The question is, if our atomic models, which we can do that, and somebody, I hope, I don't know, if somebody was able to check what was done by Holger Stark, and if his data are deposited and can be analyzed, but it will be quite curious to, in this sense, to check what's going on. On this level, local resolution became extremely important, and it's that's what I'm saying. We have not so much discussed that before, but during only last hour discussions, we suddenly turned to that local resolution became extremely essential. It's more important compared to the just general Fourier-Shell correlation. Integrative and general assessment of the Fourier-Shell correlation is important, but it should be equally represented. I do believe that it has to be shown by each deposition of map, that we have to show the local resolution maps, at least in pictures. But the question is, again, from that local resolution, exactly the issue related between, we cannot separate atomic or pseudo-atomic model together with the EM map. If EM map is wrong, eventually you have to understand, you have to accept that atomic model, you can make a wonderful without any clashes atomic. And I have to admit, I was reviewing really months ago the paper. The map was not of high quality. Fitting was absolutely wonderful, though from my point of view, it was pure fantasy. It didn't respond to anything. But in another case, when I will show you this was. The paper has resolution for angstrom, but how it can be that all chains are somehow fitted, and can you see a red diamond? They think that all amino acids are not in EM densities. This person is who has submitted the manuscript. It's another paper which I was reviewing. And this is sufficiently reliable map. It was sufficiently good fit in pictures, but I cannot understand where was the problem. Was the problem made by a person who deposits the data, or it was a problem in the evaluation of the data in our EM database? Look, how can it be that he has 20 chains, all of them like that? How can it be? Who made a mistake? I do believe it's quite simple trouble. Wrong origin. That origin for the PDB files and EM map, they're slightly different. It's a question. Can it be fixed within the EM database or not? Otherwise, I cannot explain. I cannot believe that this guy who was doing fitting, and he was saying that his assessment, more probative graphs are, for some reason, quite amazingly good. But how they cannot fit to EM densities? It's a mathematical issue. It's a problem of the wrong origin. It has to be somehow fixed and checked. But I don't know how to feel that. I did so far previously, and actually never checked the EMDB data validation fast. But after this paper, when it was quite a lot wrong fitting and non-existing densities, when I check on PDB validation of the data, I looked at this map. It's another paper, and I was really shocked. I cannot understand what is wrong, but this is one of the practical issues which have to be fixed.
Can I ask a question, Maria?
Yeah.
Is this an issue with the choice of contour for the atom inclusion score? Or?
I didn't look on either on the contour. I didn't look at the setter. It's a result of validation of the map. And I do not believe that it depends very much on the contour. It's a systematical error.
Okay.
Because knowing this guy, he's really keen to do high resolution. His resolution was, he honestly claimed that it only was between 3.5 till 4 angstrom. It's not for nowadays such a great, exciting resolution. It's quite important, complex, but 20 different proteins, 20 different chains, all of them, 70 and 60% out of the densities.
Is the
Knowing
whole
this,
chain just some
if it is a problem of origin only, that's a matter of shift, and there's a straightforward formula to correct both. That is not a.
But I don't know. Possibly when somebody was doing validation, he in the EM database, it was an automated way. They didn't realize and they didn't fix that. And possibly how they can know, but how people possibly the way of validation. It's really. The question
we could add something in EMDA, and PDB or EMDB can use it just to say that if the origin is correct or not.
It might be origin and might be slight rotation. That's exactly system coordinates of the PDB file being correspond to the system of coordinates of EMF.
Rotation requires a little bit more time, but origin correction takes a fraction of seconds, I think.
Look, I am not saying that it cannot be done. The question is that my impression that the authors, they didn't look at the validation report.
Maybe.
And if they didn't look at the validation report, it blindly submitted, once they have submitted the manuscript, it was quite shocking. They, to some extent, they have to look at that. But I have to admit, myself, I'm reading tons of papers from the very...
Yeah.
I mean, isn't it a little bit of a culture issue, right? Because I guess in the X-ray community now, you're used to getting validation reports and you're used to having to look
Yes,
through
it
them.
is. Look, I'm submitting my structures, my PDB files, etc. A while ago, we didn't have such a report. Such a report, my impression, came only last year.
Yeah.
That's exactly. We are doing a good job, but to some extent, we need to check what's going on. We have somehow to investigate. Is it a user problem? It's somehow can be fixed within EMDB. I'm not saying that it's, yes, they have to learn how to do that. I have to admit, I never looking at the validation reports previously 2 years ago. It's okay, it's fine. It's Ramachandran phone, etc., etc. Everything.
I've got a comment, when you're ready. There is a resolution issue. At lower resolutions, sometimes the atoms are never going to fit, in some of the longer side chains because the resolution is too low to represent the shape accurately. So I don't know if those of you that have looked at refining lower resolution maps, this is 4 angstrom. So is the lower end, is it the longer side chains? Is it any particular characteristic of atoms that are out of the density?
Large amino acids, they have to be seen, but look, it's right now, I cannot say all of them out of. I'm not saying small, big, whatever, all of them.
What are the names of them? Is that all the yellow ones, is it? Or the...
All red dots are means that they are out of density.
Yeah.
Is it one atom or all the whole side?
All of them.
Oh, the whole thing. Okay, that's
All
a
of
lot.
them. That
Yeah.
is that's Elena's point that everything is out of the density, but everything is perfect in terms
You
of.
know, when it's, okay, if it's, for example, believe me, every 10th amino acid is out, I would not mind. Then it's lousy fitting, etc. But when all of them, oops.
That is systematic.
Yeah.
If it's systematic, you should be able to correct that.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Point here,
I'm partially responsible for producing that plot because that data was generated by my validation analysis pipeline. So I can briefly comment on that. So one reason is what Agna just said, could be the control level problem. So that so in case if the control level doesn't embodied the model well into the map, so that calculation can show something like that. That's one of the reasons. So that
I'm a bit out.
Oh yeah.
Continue, sorry.
I haven't seen something like that before. So that will be good that I can know the entry ID or the PDB ID.
I
so
will
that
tell
I can,
you.
Yeah, so I can further look into that.
I will tell you, no worries. Right now, I just don't want somehow to shout, who is it? Yeah. All of you, you know this guy.
Thank you.
But honestly, it's a confidentially confident information, and I would not somehow to blame this guy that he did. I thought because
it is not confidential anymore.
It's not yet published. Okay. And I've sent in my references that has to be fixed. Might be you have got email from him. I mean, in EM database. Might be. Okay, let's go further. Since it was there are several issues. The concept of the overfitting, sharpening, blurring. To some extent, when we are doing this analysis of EM, it's quite important to understand. That's exactly like today where we're discussing and when we are listening to Artan, it's quite important to understand. What does it mean to do sharpening? And it turns out when you're doing the very first initial fitting, for example, like oh my God, my apology for wrong pronunciation. Rwanda, he did blurring to some extent, and how it has to be done. In general, we don't have any assessment what kind of criteria have to be done for sharpening or blurring. My personal experience, what I'm doing in my fitting very often, especially when I'm doing tracing of the chain de novo in a high resolution map. My best high resolution map is 2.7 angstrom. It's the highest resolution which I have achieved in my data. But I was not able to trace any polypeptide chain from the very beginning until I didn't see at least one alpha helix that is supposed to be in the structure. For that, I have done blurring. I have done low pass filtering to see only the issues where I have a when I have a helical arrangement and when I have beta sheet. Then I have started where I can to trace from that. Then I came to the high resolution. And right now we have several options how to do sharpening. We can do sharpening in Reline. We can do sharpening in CRY-Spark. We can do sharpening in Phoenix. I have compared all these three options, different packages. I don't know how much seriously the differences are serious. We are talking of that, you are using this. But the question is, for some reason, somebody has written in one page report that we are trying to combine the EMDB database together with Reline. I'm not sure. I'm not against that. It can be done, and at least something. It's quite important. But because we have different software packages, CrySpark, we have Phoenix. My comparison assessment personal of the map with which I was working, it turns out that the most reliable because it was Phoenix. They're doing, when you're doing sharpening in the real space, etc., they did the best job in sense. But look, I'm extremely subjective. I don't understand that subjectivity is extremely serious issue. I liked it more because my fitting was much more. After that, when I've done automated refinement of the fitting in Phoenix and could alternate with these packages, it does make sense significantly more. But look, but this is related very much to that, what we are doing and how we are doing. Again, to me, it's a very open question, and still we don't know that. Possibly it's a very rhetorical question, but I'm suggesting all of you to think of that. What kind of criteria we are using for sharpening, blurring, and what should be done? How people, especially if they do not know much about the process of the reconstruction, they love to have a magnificent button which will do everything for them, because neither Rely nor CrySpark, they to provide a lot of information how and what should be done. It's very confusing.
Yeah.
And I having my experience, and when I'm looking at the, because for example, in Rely you have to give a temperature factor or B factor, and what should you do? 40, 400, 80, and going on. And the people that suddenly they see imaginary fine details, but they're not realistic because they're just enhancing high frequency noise. This is a question. That's exactly what we have to understand. And now, if you remember, I was already asking the question of assessment of the differences map. It's absolutely essential. Our data not homogeneous. Our data not, how to say, absolutely, since we have molecules and solution, heterogeneity plays a serious role. That's what we are doing, for example, focused alignment, etc. That's what has been discussed, but still, in our discussion, we didn't come to this issue. This issue is quite important and we have to consider that. That's exactly, for example, do we see the drug in the structure or we don't see the structure, the drug? Because it's occupancy of this substrate. How we can verify the occupancy of this substrate? And the level of threshold, which has been mentioned here many times, and it's an important issue, but it's related to the occupancy. Might be, if the occupancy only 50%, my suggestion that it must be considered as well, and then we can suggest that, for example, if we have the threshold twice lower, it means the occupancy was not quite high. It's not even the question of bound or not bound. Very often we don't have. And the efficiency of drugs, the question how solidly it's bound. That's a question we have to, we not have to complain how high and what kind of threshold we have to use. We have to know and understand flexibility and occupancy is extremely essential factors, especially when we don't have any crystallography. Molecules and solution, it's alive and has substrate and loose substrate. How long does it hold? And it's related to the occupancy.
I have just a comment on the remdesivir case that we discussed this morning. So I looked at some papers. It seems remdesivir binds more strongly than an adenine base with the RNA. So it binds strongly. So I assume occupancy is the issue there.
Yeah. And on this level, to assess different maps, which are heterogeneous, we came to the problem of the alignment. How the alignment has to be done. If domains are moving, alignment is quite difficult because For example, you can imagine ribosome. It's a trivial example. And everybody knows about ratchet movement. And ratchet movement, we know about the nascent chain which moves. How we can distinguish what is what and how they link to each other. This is a vivid, alive system. It moves, and in solution we see Neelian numbers. That's why we're analyzing different states. That's why we're analyzing in different occupancy of negative, of nascent chain, etc. But the movement, are we going to align according to the large subunit? Then possibly we will be able to distinguish movement of the small subunits. We have aligned small subunits. We know that in the small subunits, the body and the head of the small subunits are moving with respect to each other. But those movements are much more subtle. That's exactly the question. Those factors are related to some kind of validation, and this validation of the EMF, differences in the EMF, related to the validation of atomic models, and how with atomic models we can assess the differences in structure. Altogether, I think we have a bright future. We have plenty what to do.
Are you also going to communicate the sort of this is the summary of what's in the one-pagers?
This is a somehow, look, I need to write something a bit more in detail what I've told to you, but honestly, I didn't have time because the summary came. You have in your all one-page reviews, you have slightly different. Somebody did what they explained, what they have done, but it should be formulated. Honestly, I didn't have time to formulate that in words, but when I look through all these reviews which I have got, I decided that I can give you my impression of that, what I have got from all these one-pages.
Okay, yeah, no, very interesting. So you're going to write up a more detailed summary of the one-pages. Is that what you're saying,
I
Ellen?
think I will write something, but I will tell you, I will not do anything till the next weekend.
Okay, yeah, of course, and then I guess you'll circulate the one-pages as well.
I will send to everybody the file, my, how to say, compilation of all. It will be one file with all comments. I will send to you, and I will try to send to you the rest. My, how to say, verbal description of my, what I was telling you today. But keep in mind that it's through the prism of my understanding and vision what
Yeah.
I have found.
Yeah. Well, by the way, I feel for global sharpening, I feel we did have an objective sharpening procedure. Whether it is the solution to all of the world's problems in terms of local, that's another question.
Sure.
There can still be something better for the future, but at least there was something where it wasn't supposed to let the user invent what they wanted to do. There was basically an objective procedure, and it would conform to objective scattering procedure criteria or not.
Yeah, but like the local sharpening is quite important, especially like when you look at these ligands, which could be lower occupancy than one.
Yeah.
And or have, the RNA can be slightly flexible or something.
Yes, absolutely. But the question is whether, for example, the deposited map that you're getting, are we going to ask people to submit extremely local sharpened map? That's one thing they can submit. But of course, Elena did bring up the point that maps, and as indeed all the presentations over the past few weeks have, that it's very easy to create a feature that looks like a water or a bump on a ligand
Exactly. Yeah.
via over sharpening. So
Yeah.
so that's why I did think to have the importance of having a globally sharpened map according to agreed criterion is a good thing for the database.
Yeah, it's a good reference point. Yeah.
But I do believe even if you have an average assessment, integral assessment, that your map is about 3.5 angstrom, it means that you cannot do sharpening high as, for example, 3.2 angstrom or 3.5 angstrom. It means otherwise the rest will be, sorry, non-realistic features. But even from my point of view, keep in mind that it's another. It's a problem in real life. If you have something completely everything wrong, it's not only real life, it's any software. But you have to imagine that if you have all angles are wrong and they are randomly distributed, you will get the ball. But if you have one half map and another, and both of them producing a ball, you will have a wonderful Fourier shell correlation. Everything is wrong. Fourier shell correlation possibly will be up to the Nyquist frequency flat.
Actually, I'm seeing some of the questions arising in the chat, and I suppose this is a database question, which is the database official contour level that's reported, that's suggested. I think we don't believe so much in that number, as you know. I guess in a way that number is for somebody who's pulling up a map and is not a structural biologist, I guess, right? Otherwise, in other words, I know that there's a lot of problems with that. We would always look at it ourselves. Actually, maybe the EMDB people might want to comment on their emphasis on that number for reporting the database entries.
I think the contour level that we collect, I mean, it should be the contour level at which, I mean, the main interpretation of the map has been done. So what's being represented in the paper, for example. But of course, now it's not, you're using multiple contour levels, you're moving contour levels to look at different parts of the structure and so on. So I think we did add support to allow people to have or to give us multiple contour levels. But this is really something which is not well established, and you probably would then have to not only have different contour levels, but you would also need to have some metadata which tells you what, so use this contour level to look at this ligand or this part of the structure, and none of that is proper. So it is very subjective still.
Yeah, but nonetheless, mind with the general information at which level was done this and at which level was done another. They have somehow to give us, to provide some kind of information. If it's twice lower or 3 times lower, then maybe it should correlate with the occupancy. At least we can analyze something. Yeah. So far, we don't have any even statistic of the represented data.
Yeah, so I think from a database perspective, so from our perspective, to collect multiple contour levels, I think we already have the support for doing that. We could also collect multiple contour levels and have an explanation for each of the contour levels.
Yeah.
Is it better to have a mask or something instead of having multiple contour levels?
I guess, though, in some sense, it would be hard to make like a detailed mask like that, though, right? Like, imagine if you wanted like one contour level for looking at a handful of side chains.
Yeah, if a mask explains your model and it covers the whole of your model, something.
If you want to have a couple of side chains, a couple of residues, then you do a mask for those amino acids only. And calculate a RMSD within that. And that, if signal level is low, then you will have a very low RMSD. And signal level will be low because you have a p-value or some other issues. The main idea is that noise level is same almost all everywhere. And the only problem is the signal level. So you have to be able to establish signal level. And that's the one idea. But for total, you could just a volume corrections and so on.
Yeah, I have a question to Gary. How do you decide between high B factors versus low occupancy? Is it?
That is exactly what we are trying to work on. That is a little bit at lower resolution they will have a similar effect.
Yeah.
But if you look at the, if you don't like FSC or like FSC, if you look at FSC, one of them is essentially a noise reduction by a factor, occupancy. Yes.
Yeah.
Another is one is a signal reduction by B value, by resolution dependent signal reduction.
Yeah.
And if you look at the a correlation, local correlation in real space, they will have similar effect.
Okay.
It would be very tricky to do that. But there are other ways of this. If no. Would not work. Okay. No, I don't know another way at the moment. But the idea is that you need to have a 2-parameter fit.
Okay.
Local fit, and that is what we are at the moment talking with the Rangana. That can we use a local resolution estimate local B value? Seems that there's a formula you can do that, but it needs to be implemented, tested, and tested again, and then thrown away.
Yeah, sounds like a tricky issue, but useful to.
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be a formula. If you assume certain things, that what is the relative p value to relative to all other things, or average. And if you can calculate that, there should be a distribution of correlations, because there's a distribution of p values.
Yeah.
And if you have a multiple domains with different mobility, then you should have a bimodal type of distributions.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the correlation is directly dependent on p values and occupancy, obviously.
Yeah, I was looking at the remdesivir model, and it has very low b values for the ligand.
That is exactly what does that mean? It means that they have over sharpened and they have done a not improper refinement.
Yeah, yeah, it looks quite like that. Yeah.
And I mean, whenever I do refinement, I just blur first. They just blind by 20 or 30, because I've not seen any map in the EMDB that doesn't need blurring.
Yeah.
Not yet. There will be, I guess.
Except for the unfiltered map.
Oh, if you have unfiltered map, then you are in a not dreamland, but somewhere in a no man's land. Yes.
Yeah.
Unfiltered, not unfiltered, unfiltered half maps.
Yeah.
And at least that would be a very good way of going, because then you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Not whatever you want, certain things.
So can I ask one question? I mean, one thing which I noticed from looking at many of these papers is so a lot of people are starting to use CryoSpark to start things up. And I mean, there was only one of these which actually admitted to using another structure as an initial startup reference. Everyone else was saying that they're using reference-free startup and so on. I mean, is it really true that CryoSpark is working that well that they are doing this completely reference-free startup, or is is it just that they have not described what is, because it looks like, you know, fantastic black box stuff. You just put stuff into CryoSpark, you get an initial structure, and that you can put into Reliant. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
It does work, and the reason why people are using CryoSpark because they rely on had to remove that particular reference-free initial model generation because of a patenting issues.
Okay.
They have something different, but it will come at some point.
And you do sometimes choose from several models. You know, there is a slight bias there. You pick one that you think looks best.
CryoSpark is more a reference free. It's based on a stochastic gradient descent method that was well established in machine. You start from almost from random point and go to the structure you would like.
Yeah. Yeah. So it really does work. You know, certainly subjectivity as you go through the processing. You could throw away a conformer that you don't like if you want to, but so I think in a way compared to the way it was a few years ago, Ardan, it looks like people aren't hiding some arduous effort and thinking to get that map.
The CryoSpark is not free.
Yeah. Well, in time, there should be, you know, hopefully there'll be something better to replace it. I guess it's just as a question whether a company makes it first or whether some people who want it distributed freely. Of course, the other thing probably about CryoSpark is they are spending a lot of time engineering it to be an easy, fast tool. So one of the things I think we are sure of, that there are steps where you might do better and rely on, but those steps of moving between programs and moving back again slows people down. And I suspect in the COVID era, people aren't wasting time on some theoretical optimization of a particular step. So, I mean, what's fascinating about the COVID structures, they're all coming out at once. We're all looking at them all simultaneously with the fresh mind. And because they've come out fast, they may not be the best job, but that's also the thing that's giving us the food for thought in the analysis. In a way, all the observations we're making from the COVID maps, one probably want to look at, search for the same issue on a set of other well-determined maps in the database, or ill-determined maps. So, so I would say it's this COVID-19. It's a great driver at the moment, but you know, it's in some sense one will have to generalize beyond that, because for example, I mean, we're all staring at the same ligand, and that's what's allowing us to speak about it. But what we say about this particular ligand probably won't be of too much importance.
I think, Peter,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just want to say that, I mean, last time when we had the meeting on COVID, a number of people showed the interaction between the S1 receptor binding protein and the ACE2 receptor. And I think that might be an interesting case to put in a paper, because we clearly show all the issues that we were discussing today with control level and all these things can be shown very clearly there. And we have a crystal structure that we can compare, because the reason I'm saying it is that a number of people from the modeling world actually have used this now to look at the interaction, score interaction, trying to publish it in high impact journals. And then they are using the crystal structure. Good. I mean, I don't know, maybe there are people out there looking at the EM structure, but I think they clearly understand that the EM structures are not reliable enough to make this sort of calculation. We're adding errors to errors. So I think that might be a good kind of case. And we can take that as a case for a paper And then there we have a crystal structure that we really of the same thing that we can really compare. And we have EM maps at a number different EM maps showing the same thing with different errors. So maybe something like that. I agree with the drug. It's a bit of a more of a problematic issue because we don't really know the answer there.
Oh no, excellent point on that. The ACE2 crystal structure is at least, whether it's applies to all the individual EM incarnations of it. It's a great, makes a lot of sense that.
And then we can take the example of the RNA polymers and then put that as the test and say, okay, this is what we think about this as a test. But maybe to start with, we can take something that we know, at least we think we know an answer, a better answer. It's not that crystallography necessarily is the ground truth, but in this case, it's probably better. So. And people are using these models for drug discovery as well, just to say. Not the RNA polymers, of course, but the ACE2. They are using those models to try and find new drugs.
The screening, are they like doing virtual screening or are they building?
Yeah, virtual screening, trying to compare it to other species and see which amino acids are important for developing the disease. There's all sorts of things that people are doing with these models now. But trying to calculate binding free energies, but if they're using a really wrong model, then what's the point?
Okay. Rungana was trying to show us something a few hours ago.
Okay. I think Aski can show it up. Why not? So nothing. Let me share my screen. I guess you can see my screen. Okay. So can you see my screen?
Not yet. No.
Not yet. So I guess I already shared it. Okay. Show desktop.
Yeah.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. So basically, this is very similar to what Alan showed. So what I did here is, so on the left is a 332.1210. That's with Ramsdivir. So that's the one Ying et al. So the right one is without that. So that's Helen. So this is the EMGB code 11007. So what I did was, so I resampled right on the left map and then overlaid using EMDA. And then I just looked at how they differ. So I mean, we see some density in this ligand region here, but we don't see much of them in the unliganded, or there shouldn't be ligand in this case. I mean, as
there, where your arrow was, just above the nucleotide, there's a piece of density.
Yeah, so this bit of nuclear density, that's what Alan mentioned as well, right?
Yeah.
And then we don't see this connecting density as it here. So as Adan mentioned, so probably this is not a best cut, but yeah, I just took only these two cuts. I haven't calculated the difference map. If I want to do that, then I really have to scale the densities. So I haven't done that yet. So it's just the resampling and then fitting. Yeah. So That's it.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same as what I did then. Just yeah.
Yeah.
Do they have the same RNA sequence or is it different?
You mean the model?
The two models.
No, actually, this is the same model.
But originally they're different.
How about the maps? All the maps are for different models. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember from Arden's presentation, they have a different sequence for the RNA.
Yeah.
So here, what I did is, so map and model come from the left picture, and the right picture is this resample map on the left model.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see the stoichiometry of the drug and the difference between the two samples. If one has low remdesivir than the other.
Well, one shouldn't have it at all, I don't think.
No, so the right map shouldn't have any remdesivir.
Oh, it's just the RNA. Okay.
Yeah.
Would be good to have a look at different contact level also. Because then it tell you that if there is some density around this base, yes, on the and it would be interesting to see what could be there. But half maps would be good. Rangana, you should get in touch with those authors to say that you want half maps.
Yeah.
I just please don't forget that
here, so here is the code. I can pull it out. 1 second. Since I'm working on two screens, it's not easy.
So it might be that the adenine in the RNA
So
in the second.
I'm going down the
low level. Yes, it's interesting. Yes.
This is the structure that shouldn't have any density,
There's something.
Yeah, there's something bleeding here.
So what's the explanation for that then? Is there anything that could account for that density there, other than noise?
It doesn't look like noise. I think they have been
Doesn't make
blurred.
any sense to look at the wrong model here. This model doesn't belong to this map, so the RNA is different. So there's no reason to assume that there should be any remdesivir here. If it's going to be anywhere, it's going to be opposite a T rather than, you know, the thing on the left is clearly a pyrimidine and not a purine. You know,
yes.
You have to overlay the proper model itself, and then wherever there's an adenosine, you can start to look for, you know, if
yeah. I think that the point
to assume that it's
that's right. Yeah.
Correct model should also be put there, but I thought that the point was here that what happens at the position where remdesivir when there's no remdesivir.
No, but the sequence is different, so there's no point at looking at this particular point in space. You don't expect anything.
I also think that the model where there's no remdesivir, the adenine is likely to be more flexible because it's a terminal adenine, and the stacking energy of remdesivir is better than just adenine. So you will have a more stable stacking there. So I guess you tend to see more density because of that reason as well.
Mm-hmm.
But why is the stacking stronger?
I'm afraid that we need to check. That's what I was saying before, how the distribution of angles in the reconstruction was happening.
I think the good place to look at that nitrogen, triple bond nitrogen. Does it make any interaction?
It forms, I mean, I found a paper which talks about this interaction. The nitrile group forms interaction with the amino acid.
That would explain a stabilization.
Yeah.
Well, interesting.
Because that is the only difference as far as I know.
Mm.
I just want to comment one thing, and that is that you should probably not forget that there's one more paper. The Wang paper has also remdesivir in it. So
Yeah, I should
your
look it up.
question, and I mean, I have to say that this paper on its own was a little bit of outline in not only, I mean, in several of the observations, for example, that the NSP8 is, so it might be good just to have a look at that paper as well, and that those maps before maybe putting too much time in on this one.
Ardan, do you know that Holger and yours and Sriram, they have deposited their high resolution maps and fittings?
So I don't know off the top of my head, but I think the maps are out, right? But the raw data is not out, as far as I know.
Possibly I would not care for a while even about the raw data. With raw data, it's quite a lot of troubles to reprocess them, to understand and what they have deposited and how it's related to that this subset from which they have got their best reconstruction. It's a bit tricky issue what they were depositing. But altogether, why I'm talking of them, this Holger, Sjors and Sriram. Sriram was using his classical beta galactosidase. He claiming that he got resolution 1 point, I do believe, 8 angstrom. And I wonder what was distribution of angles and how it's even and how they're really doing sharpening and what is fit to what. In sense of the Holger star, he did up ferritin. It's a much, since it's a cubic symmetry, it has much more even distribution of angles. And I was wondering what kind of parameters, for example, for sharpening, etc., he has done. My understanding that Sjors and Holger Stark, everything in bioarchive. I do believe they have submitted data. I don't know if it's available for the public, but even within EMD database, possibly we can check how it depends on the threshold, what kind of sharpening, etc. You can have this information. It's just how to say for our inner assessment. Is it really? Because the point is, I don't know how much does it say to you, Peter will understand me, that they were all these three works they have done using cold emission gun. So far, the rest what we are doing on Titan Christ, everything was used using the heated field emission gun. That's exactly the coherence of the cold emission gun should be significantly better. And keep in mind the Sriram has used 200 kilovolt microscope. He was not using 300 kilovolt microscope. It's quite important. If people will be able to use that, it will be great. But nonetheless, to some extent.
I went looking for those structures in the database earlier. I think maybe even at our last meeting, I didn't see them there. I didn't see that the bioarchive referred to numbers as yet. So once anybody knows that they're there, circulating it would be good, because I think what Elena is absolutely saying is that is true, that those new maps give us a lot of tools for looking at these, at all the things we're discussing. Very important. I think that's true.
And that Gerard, you're so silent today. I'm worried. Are you okay?
I was thrown out. I think I had a broadband issue or a VPN issue, so I've only just rejoined. So I missed the whole discussion
But
after you mentioned we didn't know the EMDB code yet for the atomic resolution structure.
Yeah. All right. Do you?
Yeah, so I just checked. I can confirm that I don't think Holger or Sriram have deposited.
Yeah.
At least they're not out yet.
Yeah. But actually, Garib, I assume you worked on that high resolution stuff, right? Or was he?
He has gone somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Shorsh has, I mean, the Shorsh structure was deposited, and that we have a full set, including the Empire data.
Okay, yeah, great.
But we checked, one of the people on the Stark paper had started Empire deposition, but there weren't any files there yet.
Mhm.
So I think Osman was going to send them an email to encourage them to deposit this data.
Oh no.
I think we have been exhausted for today. Peter, give us your